Welcome back to 10-Point Turns. Today I am going to cover the constant conversation in Age of Sigmar, list building. If you access any online forums, especially Discords, surrounding competitive play, you will quickly observe that 99% of those conversations completely surround list building. And why shouldn't it? After all, AOS and Warhammer games in general use a point system to allow anyone to bring whatever units they want, and it allows for a lot of creativity in the list building step. Why wouldn't you trust your competitive players, guys who are consistently winning tournaments, to build good lists? Why is it when you, the new player, play those lists, you lose consistently? I personally am not a fan of constant conversation around list building. That's actually why I made this channel in the first place. I wanted to create a space to discuss competitive Age of Sigmar without being dominated by what lists are running the meta, and instead focus on how to play the game. However, I feel the need to address my opinion on the list building conversation, and why I dislike how much it dominates the competitive conversation. I have a couple of problems with list building being the main focus of competitive discussion. The first one is how it warps a new player's perspective when it comes to collecting. The second is how net listing strips the creativity from a lot of newer competitive players. Lastly, it often leads to a misclassification of units. Age of Sigmar has an incredibly high barrier to entry, between the cost of the physical models, the time required to build and paint the models, and then the extensive rules that need to be learned. After a new player has jumped all of these hurdles, they are then met with the final hurdle before they can hit the tables for a tournament. A list, the sandbox of 2,000 points to fill with all of your favorite models. Being unsure of what to bring, you often find new players jump online seeking advice on how to build their list. Now, that is maybe how many of you watching started your journey in Warhammer games in general. However, you will find that a lot of newer players get into these forums before they begin collecting. And power to them. Like I mentioned before, Warhammer games in general are incredibly costly in both time and money. Gather as much information you can. Knowledge is power. And when looking at the investment that will cost hundreds of dollars and hundreds of hours, you should do as much research into what you will enjoy playing and building and painting. My issue lies in what information the new player is coming across in these forums. As I said earlier, a lot of the current conversation with Warhammer Age of Sigmar surrounds list building and competitive play. It is easy for new players to collect what is best at the moment, and by the time they collect it, rules have changed in the quarterly battle scroll, and those meta units now exist in the bottom of the barrel. It is easy for a new player to get lost in what is good at the moment, and spend time and money on something that will not live up to their expectations once the dice hit the table. The last issue with a new player is how skill is expressed in AOS. In competitive play, games are decided 5% by dice rolls, 5% by list building, and 90% by the skill of the player. As a new player, you do not have the skill to take a high-tier list and beat someone who outclasses you with a worst list or army unless there is some highly variant dice rolling. Imagine yourself climbing into a modern fighter jet and entering a dogfight with a World War I era biplane. The only issue is that you, the new player, don't know how to fly. This is how a lot of new players crash and burn, since they buy in with what is best and never learn how to fly. Learning how to play with units you enjoy and are often simpler will be a better experience as a new player and will keep your motivations high as you journey into competitive play. Just take a lot of the conversation you see with a grain of salt and understand that a lot of competitive conversation is not always geared towards the new collector or player. With that said, if you are a new player looking to get into AOS watching this, please do. Age of Sigmar boasts one of the best, kindest, most helpful player bases I have personally witnessed in competitive wargaming. It is also an incredible hobby, since you will be spending a large part of your time building and painting. Do not let this discourage you from taking the leap into this awesome thing so many of us spend our time on. But I urge you to play and build and paint what you find cool and what you will want to look at on the table, because the competitive wheel is always turning, and eventually everything will be good at some point. So now you, the new player, have collected 2,000 points and are ready to enter a tournament. You have collected what you like. Now you are preparing to venture into the competitive world. You have a good collection of models and have some choices to bring to your first RTT. You hop back into the Discord channels, post your list that you built, and are immediately hit with, why are you bringing this unit? And this unit is better than that one. Bring this one instead. A lot of the conversation around current list building revolves around what is winning at the top tables. The community at large places a lot of trust in what the pros bring, and try to emulate the list to mimic the success. Unfortunately, This leads to a lot of homogeny in lists, and does not promote the creativity that can be taken when making lists. An easy example to find is among one of the more popular armies in the game, the Stormcast Eternals. SCE has access to the Redeemer class of units, which are the cheap 2-health foot soldiers of the army. With these, you have the 100-point Liberators, 100-point Vindictors, the 110-point Vanquishers, the 130-point Vigilers, and the 120-point Vanguard Hunters. Now currently, the meta option is a unit or two of Vigilers, because of their strong ability to give a +1 to hit against the target they damaged with shooting that turn. The issue lies in the community only recommending Vigilers, and not giving the time of day to any of the other options. Now, I agree that a +1 to hit for multiple units without using command points is very strong, and powerful in the right army. But if you don't have Vigilers, they are not imperative to your success of your army, and will not win or lose you games directly. You do not, as a newer collector, need every unit that is currently in meta builds. Net decking, or net listing in this case, really destroys the creativity and experimentation that AOS offers. I would make the case that there are very few units that are truly bad. A lot of units are flawed, and are not the absolute best at what they do, but I do not think that qualifies them as bad. Unfortunately, conversations around units are very binary. Separating units into meta or not meta, or good or bad, do not allow those units to live in the middle often. I believe that most units live in the middle, and have flaws that need to be played around to get the most value out of them. Only playing what is good never lets you find what is better. You should try and experiment, and constantly take what you think could work, to find out if it does or not. There are a lot of armchair generals in the world of AOS, and they spend a lot of time telling you, the player, what is good and bad. So instead of blindly following this advice, take your own creations out into the world and learn. Find out what works best for you, not what the mainstream thinks is best. That is the trick for everyone that is getting into the hobby, is playing to your strengths, and building a list to complement how you want to play the game. Not every list has to follow the path in terms of what kind of units you're bringing. Right now, the meta is dominated by the template of one hero monster and then as many hammers as possible to be as lethal as possible. Some armies are antithetical to this, and that's totally fine, but they often lean to the other extreme, trying to outlive opponents with some buff or debuff heroes and then a ton of anvils. Find out what works for you, even if it doesn't look like what everyone else is doing. My last major gripe with the conversations around list building is the use of buzzwords that cause the misclassification of units. I have covered some of these terms on this channel, like screens, anvils, and hammers, and I've even used them in this video. However, when in conversation about list building, sometimes people will classify everything into one of those three categories and nothing else, never allowing some units that exist in between those roles their time in the limelight. Let's look at an example here. Again, I am going to be using a Stormcast unit to make my comparison. It is a popular army both casually and competitively, and most people have played with it or against it at some point. It is also the main army I play currently, so it is easier to explain to you. Look at the brand new Stormstrike Paladors. 12 inches of movement, 5 health on a 3-up save, conditional damage 2 and rend 2, and a solid ability when supported by other warrior chamber units. They are also only 190 points for 3, which is a steal for that stat line. However, they are overshadowed by their older brother, the Vanguard Paladors. The Vanguard variant moves 14 inches, has higher damage with either weapon variant, the ability to run and charge, and unique abilities to either shoot on the charge or dish out a -1 to wound after damage. They also have smaller bases, and are only 50 points more for the javelins, and 60 points more for the axes. So, how often do you see Stormstrike Paladors in competitive play? Rarely, if at all. Bringing them up in conversation around competitive lists usually yields the classic, why would I run that unit when I can run this better unit instead? It is not a good hammer. Honestly, that's true. They are not a great hammer. Only being damage 1 off the charge, having a conditional rend option, and a conditional ability does not scream incredible damage dealer. And why should it? Currently, the consensus is the more hammers the better, and Stormstrike Paladors do not fit that bill. My point lies in that just because they are not the best hammer, does not mean they are useless competitively. Having a 30 health, hypermobile anvil with some conditional abilities that I would be happy to have, but don't need, for 380 points is incredible. It's not an auto-include, but it is definitely not bad. Understanding unit roles is a huge part of Warhammer. but the next step is understanding how to flex those roles based on playstyle. At the end of the day, conversations around list building are essential. People will always talk about the game, and the vessel that list building offers remains the easiest way to converse about the competitive side. I still send my friends lists that look fun, and we spend hours chatting over minute changes. I pore over lists that do well at LVO or the World Championships of Warhammer and wonder how I can replicate some of that success. My point remains that this lens most of us choose to look at this wonderful game through needs to be adjusted in the competitive space. Let's not just focus on what we play the game with, but instead how we play that game. That nebulous 90% of skill expression that determines all of your wins and losses. Of course, talk about the units you bring and the lists you craft, but make those a part of a larger discussion on how to play. So keep building lists. Keep talking about how to build those lists and what goes in them and what they do and what the best units are. But do your own research. Be quizzical. Accept nothing as fact until tested, and use the units you think will both be fun and competitive. Encourage conversation beyond lists. Ask, how do you play this? Or what does the overall game plan look like for this army? And then go and execute that game plan and learn. Report back your findings. And instead of saying, this is what I did it with, say, this is how I did it. Oh, and this is what I did it with. I have a ton of love for Age of Sigmar. It has given me the opportunity to play a wonderfully unique game, and meet excellent people, and travel to tournaments and see new places. I will continue to make videos on it as long as I can while also playing, and building, and painting. I urge you, the viewer, to challenge yourself with how you view conversations about our game. Talk about strategies, and tactics, and game plans. Use lists as a tool for you to have those discussions, but don't let it dominate the conversations you have. It will help you learn and also help you apply your own skill into your games, instead of just putting the units on the board. More importantly, have fun. It is a game, after all. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate all the people who have supported my channel so far this year. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and let me know what you want to see next in the comments. Let me know what you think about this video, and how you view list building. Be on the lookout for something special in my next video.